Let us bow together in prayer. Precious God, we thank you for this special occasion in the life of Bennett College and the greater community. We appreciate this opportunity for instruction and enlightenment, and for a deeper view of the efforts used to keep your people informed. Thank you for the diversity of your gifts given among your children for our awareness and growth. We ask that you would use each speaker in a unique way, all for your glory, and this is our prayer in Jesus Christ the Lord. Amen.
Thank you, Dr. McLean. Hello, everybody. Welcome to everybody. We have had a wonderful morning. For those of you who were already here this morning for our Charter Day, we had a great session this morning, so it's a really exciting time to be here. Very energetic day. We're in the middle of our career week, so there are activities going on in addition to this afternoon at 6 o'clock and then throughout the week. We're in the middle of our Charter Day celebrating the founding and the making official of Bennett College for women. So we're here to celebrate vision and possibility, and so we want to show women and men, you too, what is possible for you in terms of career, and particularly careers in media. We're especially excited you'll see a little bit later on, to have James Brown, CBS sportscaster and newscaster with us. My colleagues in the journalism department will tell you that you can ask me anything about sports. You can ask me anything about sports, and I will not know. But when they said that we had the opportunity to have James Brown here, I was like, him, I know him. So he's the sort of inspiration for this event, gathering us together to talk about media. So I'm grateful for him. So he's flew in this morning from DC. He's resting up, so he'll be with us a little bit later. And so at this point, we'd like to go ahead and get started with our first panel. And I wanted to make sure if Mr. Coleman had ready.
On your programs, you'll see that I am not President Fuse Hall. So she had to step away. She greeted the panelists that were there at our luncheon a little earlier, but she had to get out of here. So I want to bring greetings on behalf of the president and Bennett College. We are really thankful for all of you that have come here. I spoke to some people from High Point. We have North Carolina A&T. I do believe someone said Winston-Salem State. So thank you all for coming, and our students here at Bennett. All the professionals, we have the Triad Association of Black Journalists and local media groups represented today, that you don't know how big of an impact you have on our students when you speak. You know, I'm not that far removed from working in a newsroom, but it was like I was never there sometimes if I say the same thing that you get up here and say. So I really appreciate it when we can get journalists in to talk to our students and just let them understand the types of jobs that they're stepping into, how they can be wonderful, how they can be tough, but how they're worth it. So thank you, greetings to all, and the first panel, we can get to come up with Mr. Paul Brock, Carrie Charles, Tracy McCain, and DeSherie Lofton. There we go. You guys can come on up to the podium. We can get started.
And also, Deidre Burton is going to be our student co-moderator with me.
Good afternoon. My name is Deidre Burton. I'm a sophomore journalism and media studies major from Prince George's County, Maryland. Today we're here to talk about the past, present, and future in the media industry. And we have an important group of panelists to talk about this. First, we have Mr. Paul Brock. He is the founding executive director of the National Association of Black Journalists. His journalism career includes work in radio, television, public relations, and political communication. In the 60s, Paul Brock was a reporter with the CBS radio and television stations in the Virgin Islands. Over the course of his career, he served as news director for the WETA-FM in Washington, D.C., and was the founding news director at Howard University's WHUR-FM. He was the vice president of Mutual Black Network, now American Urban Radio News. Mr. Brock also produced a national syndicated radio programming. Mr. Brock was Deputy Director of Communications for the Democratic National Committee during Jimmy Carter's run for office and the Campaign Communications Manager for Jesse Jackson's presidential campaign during the 1984 Democratic National Convention. He was one of 44 black journalists who founded the National Association of Black Journalists in 1975. And served as the executive director of the NABJ for almost a decade. He was a senior fellow for public affairs at Howard University's Institute for the Study of Educational Policy. Jet and Ebony both recognized him as the Man of the Year in 1975. In 1983, Brock received the Black Filmmakers Award for Producer of the Year. He won the Lifetime Achievement Award from the National Black Public Relations Society in 2013. Next, we have Ms. D. Cherie Lofton. She is the program director and music director of 90.1 WNAA-FM at North Carolina A&T State University. But we are most proud of her because she is a graduate of Bennett College. In fact, Ms. Lofton began her radio career while she was still a student at Bennett by volunteering and networking at WNAA. In addition to working in radio, Dee Cherie created and produced Ebony Vibes, a music video show that aired on Time Warner's cable public access channel. Dee Cherie's resume includes over 20 years of work at radio at WQMG FM and AM, WJMH FM, WAAA AM, WLRD FM, and WZFM FM. Dee Cherie returned to WNAA-FM in 1997, where she worked with young broadcasters in audio and video production. She was awarded the 2014 Quiet Fire Award from Cafe Mocha Radio for inspiring women to make a difference. We also have Mr. Kerry Charles. He is a morning news anchor for Fox 8 News. He also covers special assignments. He joined the station after working for stations in Cincinnati, Ohio, and Columbus, Ohio, and Shreveport, Louisiana. He also has roots in North Carolina. His mother was born in Statesville, and he has family members who still live in the area. He is the president of the Triad Association of Black Journalists and volunteers at Adcock Middle School. He's an Emmy Award winner. Mr. Charles was named a University of Cincinnati Communication Alumni Champion in 2014. And last, but certainly not least, we have Ms. Tracy McCain. Every weekday morning on WFNY's News 2, the Good Morning Show, and then again on News 2 at noon. She has been with WFNY since 2006. Ms. McCain attended college at the University of Connecticut in Swords and earned her master's degrees also at the University of Connecticut. She was a general assignment reporter in Hartford, Connecticut and Springfield, Massachusetts, where she earned several regional award nominations in journalism. But North Carolina is home for her. She is originally from Guilford County. She returned to Greensboro and has been with WFNY since. She has been nominated twice for Emmy Awards for her involvement in the community service program Read to Succeed. In January 2015, she won an Emmy. Ms. McCain is a member of the National Association of Black Journalists and a member of the National Press Photographers Association.
So one of the things that we wanted to do today is talk about the title is the past and future of media. And we have, as you see, a multi-generational panel of journalists. And so we wanted to just explore with you all the changes in media. So I'd like to raise the first question and just have each of you tell us about the most significant change that you've seen since you've been in the business.
The most significant change since I've been in the business, the start of radio, and something came along called television. No, that's not right. I started in the business back in 1960. Strangely enough, it was in the Virgin Islands, St. Thomas. Radio later got into television. Significantly, it has changed. I thought I had learned my craft well in St. Thomas, and went to New York thinking I knew all there was to know about television, and was hired on something that they were trying to get started at ABC called Wide World of Sports. And unfortunately, the producer did not like the way I'd come into the job. I was sent to the job by their the ABC corporate counsel for, I guess, diversity reasons. And the producer did not like that idea at all. And that had a bad ending. I later, I started doing part-time work with Westinghouse, and it was the beginning of efforts by the business to diversify more. The Kerner report had come out at that time, and they had advised that for true news, they were going to have to understand not only what was happening in a majority community, but also in a minority, in the minority communities. We'd gone through a small riot in Los Angeles, and people were beginning to wonder why. And the Kerner report said it was because of the lack of diversity in journalism and the reporting of news. It was slow in coming, but later, my experience that I'd had at Wide World of Sports paid off well when one of the other producers that was in on the beginning of that program came to Washington to start a news station, WETA, a PBS station, and he called and asked whether I was interested in being on the air. That job turned out to be news director at WETA, and later consideration for another program they were starting to be called All Things Considered. Somehow I ended up among the 3 finalists, which the 3 finalists were diverse, but I later found out I did not have very much of a chance of winning it. The program went on the air, and of course the rest is history, as most of you know. So the major changes have been in finally the business finally understanding the importance of diversity, how much better reporting they could get with a diverse reporting group. And when I say diverse, I mean African American, Hispanic, transgender, women. Bringing all of that diversity in made the business much better over the years. It was a major, major step in the business. And hoping that we don't go back, I just heard a report just a few days ago, this past week, that someone had said that had gone too far, and that women and minorities, the diverse groups, had taken over the business, broadcasting, journalism, print, and that they had to dial it back. I think that would be a major mistake, but I'll end my comment on that note.
Thank you, and thank you for having me here this afternoon. Before I answer, I just wanted to make sure you understand what a treasure we have here on the panel in Mr. Paul Brock. Because of him and others who have really led the way in diversifying every newsroom, both print and broadcast, publishing, everything that we know as media today and diverse population is because of this man and several others. So I just wanted to give you the props that you deserve because it's truly an honor to be sitting next to you. My answer to the question would have to be the changes in technology and how we get our news. When I was starting out in 2001, I know I don't look that aged. When I was starting out, though, we went to the courthouse and looked up documents, and we really dug into news stories. We had to do research, and we had to calculate our own numbers. We couldn't just Google it. It wasn't right in front of us. We had to come to our own conclusions, and we had to present the facts. The facts weren't simply handed to us. And I feel today, new journalists kind of rest easy on the fact that the information is already available for them and don't have to necessarily ask other questions. It says it right here. Let's go with it. When I started out, you had to find your own answers and do your own digging. And I think that's the biggest difference in our newsroom now when I sit next to the younger folks and I'm like, well, I'm going to go to the courthouse. No, it's right here online. No, I want to dig deep. But I think that in the short would be my biggest change since I started. Did you want to use this one again?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me. Before I get started, I'd like to say it is really good to be back home. To be here in this chapel, number one, I think about ACEs. You know, who can forget ACEs? But it's an honor to be back here, and when I say that, my career started while I was here on campus as a freshman. When I started here, my dad was like, Cherie, when you go to Bennett College, unpack your bags, make sure your room is on point, and go to A&T's radio station and volunteer. Because if you're gonna work in radio, you have to be on point, be well-read, and really consume what you want to be your career. So at that time, I was learning how to edit using a grease pencil and a razor blade. Nowadays, it's all digital. It's all digital. So when we talk about change, we live in an on-demand society now. So radio has really changed. We have so many things that are competing with radio, but radio is here to stay. You know, we're here to stay. And I'd like to say also, Mr. Brock, thank you for everything you've done at HUR. You did so many things at HUR when I saw that you were going to be here. By the way, my father, who was the first program director at HUR, Andre Perry, told me to tell you hello. So once again, we talk about change. There's a lot going on, and as students out there and those who have an interest in the career, just be well read on what you want to do. I say now we are in an on-demand society. There's more to come, and we have to be ahead and really embrace it and be ready for it.
She's talking about when cut and paste was actually cutting and pasting. I remember that.
Well, good afternoon. I was going to say good evening, but it's kind of my evening, a couple hours from bedtime. And thanks for having me. I am amazed at the panel and sitting here with such experience and wisdom, and I don't know why I am a part of this illustrious group. It's phenomenal and great to listen and take part and be here with you all. So thanks for having me. I would say technology, in the same lines as you all spoke to. I was 9 years old when I decided I wanted to be a television news anchor. 10 years old, I started in radio. 11 years old, I was from 11 till I think 16 or 17, a reporter and anchor for a kids news program back in Columbus, Ohio. But when we were doing radio, and I'm a little older than I look, a lot older than I look. We were doing radio, it was really, like you said, cutting and pasting. I mean, there were razor blades and folks were chopping stuff and moving it over and taking a piece of tape and applying it to these two pieces of film, and the next thing you know, it played on the radio. It's like, how in the world did they do that? When I go into a radio station today, I am so intimidated. I don't understand what's going on. The technology, I mean, you have one person who just sits there and kind of, is it just one person? One person who does the jobs, can do the jobs of so many people. But I think about, Tracy spoke about the news gathering and what we do. And it's amazing because I remember when Facebook became popular, and you all remember sitting at work, you would do this before you would check around, and then you'd log onto Facebook really quickly just to see if you had a new friend request or something. Well, now we have to be on Facebook. We have to be on Twitter. Facebook was a social media outlet to connect with friends and people you went to college with. Now it's a source for news. It's a source where people turn to get information, which is so amazing. When my newsroom found out about the tragedy at the Aurora, Colorado movie theater, I was literally a minute or two from going to get ready for the morning show to go to the makeup room, and I went to push back from my desk, and I looked and I said, there's a mass shooting in a movie theater? This is on Twitter. And this is how my newsroom found out about this shooting. And so we literally hopped on the ball and called our sister station and contacts and folks that we knew in the Denver market to track that down. But stories. It's amazing when you watch the news and you see a snow day, how much effort, I guess it's more effortless than years ago. We'll take a camera, hook it up to Wi-Fi in the car, and mount it to the dashboard. We'll just drive through town. We have different techniques and tools that allow us to use internet capabilities to do live shots from the car while we're moving and get stories and to tell stories in different fashions and forms. So I think technology is huge, and it's changing so much, even the size of the camera. You saw this gentleman his camera was just this big. You know, years ago, the camera was huge. And now stations are getting back. It used to be called one-man bands. Now they call them multimedia journalists. But you see that taking place. So I would say technology is the big difference.
That's a good segue to a question that Deidre had about technology and reporting.
Okay, so most of the time now, people of this generation, we seek our news and stuff from social media sites instead of television or the radio or newspapers. So my next question is, how has technology changed the way that news and information is reported today?
I would like to just hit that really quickly. What is most disheartening is when you log on to Facebook and we often see stories that are posted from various news outlets, credible news organizations. I saw a story posted on a news website where someone, and I don't remember the specifics, but Sarah Palin made all of these derogatory comments about African Americans. And I just looked at it and I could feel my temperature rise. I knew that wasn't a real story, but to see how it had been shared from several friends of mine, and I'm talking about educated folks with who I feel should know better. But the challenge for us is to combat that, because social media has allowed everybody to take part in this storytelling profession this what we strive to perfect and we take great care with. So many people are involved in it now, and I think that social media has provided a form and a forum for miscommunication and misinformation to be put out in the public. So much information goes out that's not vetted and it's incorrect, and people take that as gospel truth.
Yeah, I'd like to add something about that. I'm finding out that social media, what it is doing is allowing a lot of people to distort things very, very easily. As an example, an ABC station in Washington, it's really the station, the parent station in Baltimore, decided that a question was asked during a demonstration on the gentleman who was choked to death in Staten Island. So one of the reporters asked one of the marchers, a prominent member of the Baltimore community, what did you think of the police response? And did you like it? And no, the person answered, and I did not like the way the story was shot. The station didn't think that was inflammatory enough for them to be news, so they edited it down to no, and they should have been shot, putting in their own words to the person. The story ran, the person watched the story, complained, and threatened a suit, and the station apologized. The person who shot the story was laid off for a week without pay, but the news director at the station, who okayed that changing the story around, and this is the Fox station in Baltimore, who okayed that, nothing was ever done, and all he had to do was apologize. There have been a number of instances like that in Chicago, and NABJ reported that story. In fact, it was a front page story in Chicago, asking a young kid what did he want to be when he grew up, and he said, I want to be a policeman, because they carry a gun legally. And they just changed the story around that he had it so I can have a gun against the police or something. Anyway, my point is, with the technology we have today, too many stations have opted for the sensationalism of what a story could be, and are willing to change that story into some sensationalism because that draws viewers, or in the case of radio, listeners. So I think it's a very dangerous tool unless you are ethical. And so we don't preach enough about being ethical in journalism and what your responsibilities are to your public in that field.
So have any of you ever had a scare with that? I'm thinking about the fact that with the 24-hour news cycle, you're moving so fast, things are coming at you so fast. Are you concerned, or have you ever had an issue where you were concerned about libel or privacy issues, or not having time to sort of think through something that was that might be controversial?
I think that when you are a professional, you have to make time because you have to get it right. There is always an apology that can be issued, but there's also a trust factor. And when you continuously apologize, oh, got that wrong too, keep getting it wrong, well, people aren't going to go to you anymore for information. So you have to double check, and it's not just making sure you have a period at the end of the sentence or a comma to separate two thoughts. You have to think, who am I damaging? Who am I impacting by this story? Is this the best way to get this information out? And if you can answer all of those questions confidently and with accuracy and with the knowledge that you're doing the right thing, then push send, push post, go on the air with it, you're fine. But if you're confused, if you're second guessing yourself, then it's not safe at all. And to echo on what he was saying, it is a dangerous medium, social media, because in news, you used to have 1 minute and 45 seconds to tell a story. Now you have 130 characters or less if you want to add a picture. So you really have fewer opportunities to hit an audience, and that, what you were saying earlier, being on demand. People want information right now, but they want the right information, not just something that you said. Make sure it's right.
And I just want to add, in radio, we do show prep. And a lot of times I'm seeing some of our students when they're on the air, they're not taking the time sometimes to really do their research. And that really, it scares me. So I try to really reiterate, check your sources. And if you have any doubt in your mind and your gut about that, just step back. Come talk to me. I'll help you out. We'll even find Carrie. Oh my God, Tracy online. But we're always online just trying to find out what is going on, and we really encourage our students and announcers to do that. Really check your sources. If you have any doubt, just back up a little bit. Take the time and observe.
There's another thing that that Mr. Brock raised too about the sensationalism, and I wonder, we're so accustomed to, Atlanta Housewives and people catfighting and Cookie and Boo Boo Kitty and all this kind of stuff. What has been the impact of sort of the need for that sensationalism in terms of your reporting? Do you find that you have an opportunity to report sweet stories, or do you have to find something that's ratchet?
I don't know, you're the cookie station. I don't know if you want to.
I don't do ratchet. I will be the one to be very vocal in our newsroom if we are doing a story, and I don't care what time of day it is, and I don't care who's doing it, if we are doing a story simply because it's ratchet. I think we all have a platform and power and ability to reach people and tell stories that aren't being told. I do a weekly segment called Class Act. It's essentially a student of the week, but I know that when people think about young black males, the images aren't necessarily positive. Now, I don't care who the student is. Students with stories, great stories, those stories need to be told. Because teenagers these days, I felt so old saying that. Kids these days get a bad rap. And so there are good stories to be told, but I know, I've been a black male for a long time, and I know what it's like to be painted with a brush of pure negativity. So what I do with Class Act is I try and highlight stories and use it as an outlet, and I haven't had any challenge with it yet, but I highlight students whose voices may never be heard on a large scale, especially little boys who remind me of myself, who come from communities that remind me of home, places that they may not have the access to get their stories told, but I think it's extremely important to find those ways and avenues to tell good stories and get away from the sensationalism and the stereotypical ideas. So if you are a reporter in the newsroom and you need a professional, a doctor, we don't always have to go and find, I will say, we can go and find people who look like us and get them in the stories. And I think that I think that changes the world in a huge way that we don't even realize.
If I could just add on something to that, it is true that journalists have a lot of pressure coming from a news director, editor, news owner of a station or a newspaper. I'm thinking of the Denver paper now, where the managing editor there did not want to do a story that the owner was suggesting had to be done, a sensational, and the managing editor refused to run it at the risk of his job. And he's still there, so obviously he made a good decision. But it is not only owners and news directors, assignment editors putting pressure on the journalists and reporters. The public is also. When you see the ratings that you mentioned, the Housewives story, and some of the other sensational stories that we've had out here, some of them have been edited in a way that was unfavorable or not true, or they got it wrong because of rushing, and because wanting to do something sensational, which would get more attention. So the public is putting quite a bit of pressure on newsrooms to do sensationalism stories.
Okay, so I have a question for Ms. Lofton and Ms. McCain. Being at a women's college, I would just like to know what were you guys' experience being women in the media industry?
I mean, I'm experiencing it every day. I can't separate the fact that I'm not just a woman, I'm an African American woman. So I have to combine the two because that's my reality. And I stand up. I speak out when I see something that's not right, and I own it. If there's a story being done that, for instance, a few years ago, a reporter at our station went to the Alamance County Health Department and had to have found the worst candidate to demonstrate the African American woman possible to put on TV. This woman had rollers in her hair, a headscarf, a torn shirt, 4 babies, and she really wasn't speaking clearly. And it didn't add to the story at all. And I saw that and I said, take that down immediately. Because first, from a journalist point of view, it doesn't add anything. But secondly, what are you saying to America? What are you saying to our community right now? Are you saying that this is what represents us, me? And I have a problem with that. So I always have to be the voice in our newsroom of making sure that things are represented fairly. I'm not saying that every African American woman is this way, that way, or another way. But what I will say is when there's an opportunity to represent us properly, we should be taking that.
Are you tired of being the voice?
No. No, because if I give up, who will? And then anything's going to get on TV. And I take that responsibility, and I'm okay with it. Because even when I leave work, I'm still that person. So it's just all day, every day. But it does, become a little heavy, but I accept it. It's who I am, and it's worth the fight.
In radio, especially now, the last maybe 5 years, music has changed. And being the music director at 90.1, it's a challenge because I have other stations in the market that have, I guess, a longer playlist. They have corporate, how can I put this and be nice? They have heads that say, no, we want you to play this song because it's #1 in New York City or LA. and that song might be demeaning to a female's character. One thing at 90.1, I do not allow music to be played that will demean the character of women. And there's a lot of music out there now. It's just, it bothers me. I'm in non-commercial radio now, but when I was in commercial radio, that was a big thing. Some of the music I had to play, calling women bees. It bothers me because I have goddaughters, and I just don't feel like they should be called out of their name. So I've really been strong about that for a very long time, and that's one of the biggest problems I've had in this industry. Some of the music that the record labels want me to program. And I've noticed now, if I don't program certain artists, we don't get the music that we used to get. So we're struggling getting music because I refuse to play music that's going to demean the character of women. So that's my biggest problem.
Can you explain that to people who may not know about when you say that you don't get the music that you used to get? How does that process work?
You know, it used to be back in the day, if you have a stick, and the stick means the antenna to a radio station, if you have an antenna, the record label will service you records. Well, nowadays we don't get records, we just get MP3s and a few CDs. I was dating myself, okay. But radio stations and record labels, they used to work hand in hand together. But I guess now, if there's a station that will not play things that they want us to play, that will affect our community, they say, okay, you're on your own. And I've noticed that. I really have. So, service, it's gone down.
You raise an interesting point, Tracy, about your role and seeing yourself as a woman and as a black person and not being able to separate that out. We have a panel of all African American. I assume y'all are all African Americans. For the rest of you, what kind of impact does that part of your being or that part of your identity play in how you report and what your interactions are with your colleagues in your newsrooms?
Well, I thought you were going to answer that question, but I will say this. I've been encouraged. I've found two heroines and a hero on this panel. And I'm not including myself. Sometimes we worry about young people. They are not liking what we stood up. I have a number of founders who are getting very, very old these days. But they don't think, because to come to the founding meeting, by the way, could have meant that you lost your job in those days. In fact, maybe a half a dozen of them did lose their jobs simply by coming to the founding meeting.
You mean when you put together, when NABJ was being formed?
Yes, when NABJ was being formed. And I'm not talking about some small backwoods station. I'm talking about there were people who came to the meeting but refused to sign their name, and there were those who did not come. I'm talking about from one newspaper, from a paper like the Washington Post, very progressive paper, or so its reputation was. The same with the New York Times. There were people who came and were acknowledged coming to that meeting, but there were people from those two newspapers, very progressive, who could not come, or felt they could not come because it would jeopardize their jobs. It was a dangerous time to be outspoken. Where I was going with that was, among the founders, I have a number of them saying, well, the young ones, they go along to get along, and they don't know what we went through, and so forth. When I go back, I'm going to tell them there are a lot of young people, and I sat on a panel with 3 of them, who have the same spunk that many of you exhibited at the founding of the organization.
So I have bragging rights now. That's awesome. Thank you so much for saying that. I think I arrived at my station in August of 2011. I was surprised to learn, I still laugh at it sometimes, that I'm the first black male anchor at my station. And my newsroom in the morning, we had an African American reporter, female reporter. And I think that was it. It was the two of us. And oftentimes she would literally walk in the door and would be out of the door within a matter of moments. And so it was me in a room with white women who, for many, was their first time interacting with a man of color who asked plenty of questions. One of our producers, she's sitting here, she's like, brother asks questions all the time. Ask questions. I'm a former producer, so if something just isn't right and it doesn't feel right to me, I'm gonna be vocal about it. But I know that when I speak a little louder, I'm intimidating, I'm threatening, I'm angry, and all. I'm just like, I just wanna know if it happened in Greensboro or Winston-Salem. When I arrived, I had a goatee, it was fuller, and now I wear it shadowed. And did I tell you the story? Yes. It was brought to my attention that I needed to shave because there were concerns that I appeared to be gangster. And I said, well, that's just too bad because I've had facial hair since I got on air. I've had facial hair for years. I was hired this way. I don't see any complaints that come into our newsroom. We get a kind of a public folder. Don't see any complaints. I'm fine with it until I decide that I'm ready to change my look and I want to switch things up. Carrie's going to have a goatee. Now, I have colleagues who are on air who aren't of the same hue as I am, who have facial hair, and that's not a problem. And those are conversations that we need to have in newsrooms. And so I need someone to explain to me, why is it a problem that a man of color with facial hair, now mind you, I'm in the barbershop every week, every Sunday, or it was Sunday, but every week, trying to get cleaned up, trying to be perfect, because I know that when I get to the table, we're always told we have to work twice as hard. I know that my shirt and my tie and my education and my experience is just not enough. But I also say that when we have conversations in newsrooms because I'm the first one to say, hey, that description of that black male with the black jeans and he's medium build, that needs to go. I'm also the first one who says, hey, that description of the white male with the ball cap and the jeans and the leather coat, that needs to go. And I think we need to have those. So what I try and do is use my experience as a black male to shine it on other people, because I hate the stereotypes. We all hate those stereotypes, but we do the same thing when it comes to other folks. But if you can put the light on other folks and let them know, when we have a white male who fits this stereotypical description, I'll say, this could be our producer right here, John. Do you want this on air? And John's like, no, I don't want anybody coming for me. And so when we have that and it plays out, I found success with that.
I'd like to ask some advice. What would you tell college students about being competitive in the media industry?
I'm just going to go quickly. Compete with yourself. Do your best and be your best at all times. I can't worry about, Tracy and I go head to head every morning.
That's not true.
Tracy and I go head to head every morning. I cannot be concerned about what Tracy is doing at her station and her show with her experience and her skill set and her talent and her being from this community. She brings, some will say, much more to this community than I can, but I know what I bring to the table. There's, I would say, a friendly competition. I don't think when I got to town, she welcomed me to town. She, if you need anything,
I took you to lunch.
Took me to lunch, didn't pay. Didn't pay. But I don't know that we've ever had a competitive situation where we were, I was going, Tracy, we were up for an Emmy against each other. I won the Emmy first, then she won. But let me tell you who was so supportive and who was so kind and in a roundabout way when we were bragging about it on air and so excited. I kind of gave a shout out to them, and I messaged her and said, hey Tracy, I just want to let you guys know that I also said cool stuff because so many other people, including people in our market, were up for this same award, and we're all doing great work. I don't know that I have a competitive bone in my body except for with myself. It may not be true, but
No,
say something nice.
I always do. I feel as though when you get to a certain level in your career, you realize that it's not about who you are on TV, it's who you are as a person. And I think that reflects equally on the screen. And so if you are genuinely a charismatic, caring, nice person in life, that's going to translate. So when you're competitive with other people and talking dirty about people, other coworkers or other people across the street at different stations, just like in life, that's going to bite you. So my recommendation to you would be the person who you are all the time.
That's interesting, the conversation that I just heard. In my town of Washington, D.C., there's a person who I believe is as stringent and as exacting as Tracy here. And she has been on the 2 network stations there. One in which they tried to treat her differently, reduce her pay. She was an anchor, evening anchor, and I'll give you her name, Maureen Bunyan. She said, no, why are you cutting my pay? Well, women don't need as much money as men and so forth and so on. She left that station, refused to accept that pay cut, and she had always been outspoken, outspoken. ABC snatched her up right away, and she's going to kill me for saying this. At 75 years old, she is still there, and she will be there as long as she wants to. The public can sense on television and even on radio a person who has unusually high character. They can sense it. They can see it on television. They can hear it on radio. And they support that person. Maureen Bunyan is one of the most promoted people in broadcasting in Washington, D.C.
I just wanted to add one thing about radio. Like you said, our listeners can feel our passion. And I think within radio, that competition, if you're really in touch with your listeners, you know how they're feeling. And one thing about radio, we love phoners. We love taking calls and putting those calls on the air. That's one thing I miss about commercial radio. I miss those new friends that I would meet every day. When they had problems, I took the time to listen. And luckily, if I had that nice song, they would feel even better when I played it after talking to them. So I think things like that make a difference, If you're true to yourself, you're true to your listeners, you're going to be okay. And your viewers, you're going to be okay.
Can I just add one other thing? Just to add, there is no loyalty in TV. There is no loyalty in radio. There's no loyalty in newspaper. If you're at a bus stop and you see a paper, you're going to pick it up and you're going to read it. It's not USA Today, I can't read it. There is no loyalty. People channel surf just like they change the channel on the radio, probably faster than they change the channel on the TV. So when we can't get caught up in competition, because nothing I say is going to keep you watching me longer than anything else. You just have to do you and represent your station and yourself well.
Thank you. One last question. I would just ask each of you to tell me one hope that you have for the future of media.
One last hope, you were saying. I would hope that more stations, as you know, many of these stations are being bought by a small minority of companies. At one time, you couldn't own two stations in the same market and so forth. Now, you can own as much as your wallet will purchase for you. And it has hurt the industry. So my hope is that to give the public a better understanding of the news, a more honest presentation of the news, that we cut back on the number of stations or corporations, I should say, that are demanding of their various stations that you make a profit, that you cut back wherever you have to, on whatever you have to make sure that the profit line increases. We need more good reporting based on what we owe the public. And I would hope that we move more in that direction instead of one or two, three, half dozen corporations owning everything in this country.
Well, I wish saying ditto was appropriate, but since it's not, I agree with what you're saying. I think I would add to that on the fact of the young journalists that are coming out into the world of journalism. I hope that you get enough experience to really feel confident, to really own your job and feel proud of it. We have a lot of people who walk into a newsroom and say, I hate my job. Why are you here? Why would you do something that you don't love to do or enjoy doing? So if you're going to go out and pursue this career actively, love it, like it. But as soon as you say, I hate it, it is time to go, because you're just making it worse for yourself, worse for me, who loves my job, and the viewers who are watching you or listening to you. So that's my hope. Just love it. If you don't, find something else to do.
I would say my wish in radio, we don't have enough news. I know this is weird, but I love news because I think we all need to be informed. So I think my wish would be if we had more news. And just so you know, we're working on that at WNAA. Because radio stations back in the day, like HUR, they were that voice of the community. And we need that voice again now with everything that is going on in our society. And I think radio needs to get back to being that voice for the community. We have talk shows like The Bottom Line, and we have other shows, but we need more of that so our listeners can call us and let us know what's on their mind. And maybe we can help them find a solution. So I think we need that. That's my wish.
I think my hope is centered around diversity. I've worked in newsrooms that have been predominantly black, and amazed me at how chocolate it was when I walked in the door. I've walked in newsrooms that have been the complete opposite, and I've worked in newsrooms where there's been that mix. And I think diversity is so important. I say in our newsroom often that we've since changed our internship program, but we need to stop getting all of our interns from High Point University. Not because High Point, nothing wrong with the school, great students. But if we are focused on High Point University, black, white, rich, poor, that's one community. There's so many schools in this area. When we talk about diversifying, we can step out and reach out to Bennett College. We can reach out to UNCG. We can reach out to Guilford College, North Carolina A&T State University. And if we can get the idea of that diversity doesn't just mean black and white, and it's much broader than that, I think we'll be in good shape.
This is brilliant. Thank you all so much. So we're going to move on with our program because you have more brilliance to come. Take a breath, and we'll be back.
Everybody, a round of applause for our president, who is a big sports fan.
Thank you so very much for being here. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I just want to welcome those of us who are visiting with us to Bennett College. As you can tell, we're excited about this day. And I want to give kudos and congratulations to the faculty and the students from the Department of Journalism and Media Studies. All the students, would you please stand? If you're a part of JMS, thank you so much. We're so pleased with what you're doing. As you know, Bennett College is a college that prides itself on bringing intellectual stimuli to this community. And that first panel was extraordinary. I know a few members and had lunch with a couple of members of this panel. You're in for a real treat. And then, of course, our dessert will be James Brown, the CBS correspondent, reporter from 60 Minutes, news anchor, and sports reporter extraordinaire. We couldn't have a better day. We hope that you will enjoy yourselves. And please remember, anything that's happening at Bennett College, you are always welcome to come and join us. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to start, and we'll go ahead and introduce our panel, start from your left to right. And I'd like to start by introducing Kyle Serba. And he graduated from Utica College and Syracuse University in 1991 with a bachelor's degree in public relations and journalism, along with a minor in speech communications. Kyle started at NCCU as their director of sports information in 1994. And in that role, he coordinated media relations, advertising, marketing, and promotions, and all of that for the athletic department at NCCU. He won the CIAA Sports Information Director of the Year in 1999 and was a four-time John Holly Sports Information Directors Award. And he has had many leadership roles in the NCCSIA, which is the North Carolina Collegiate Sports Information Association. And he was inducted in the Hall of Fame for NCCU, the NCCU Alex M. Rivera Athletic Hall of Fame on October 20th, 2006. And when we said we were going to have this program and we'd have an opportunity to bring people that have had successful careers in sports, the president, the first person that came to her mind, she said, give Kyle Serba a call. And on short notice, he came out, and I had a chance to talk with him at lunch. You're really going to enjoy hearing from him. And Quisha is going to introduce our next panelist.
Liz Crawford is the WFMY's News 2 sports anchor. Liz Crawford is a definition of a well-rounded journalist with experience as a sports anchor and reporter. Liz made a name for herself. Crawford is a Philadelphia native and began her career at WFMY News 2 December 2011, starting as a news reporter for the 11 p.m. newscast. Leaving her home of New Jersey, she came to the South and it paid off. During this time, she covered events such as the Dixie Classic in Winston-Salem and more serious topics like politics. Before leaving her hometown of Erie, Philadelphia, Liz was a traffic reporter. She attended the College of La Salle University.
Now I'd like to introduce Mike Carter, a former teacher at Bennett College And how many of you here are students? And we've got students here from a variety of schools, which is great. Mike started at Bennett College, and he was the sports editor of the campus newspaper, sports director of the campus TV station, and sports reporter on the radio. So for those of you, I hope when you go to a thing like this, it kind of lights a fire under you to get involved in your campus activities. Mike's a great example of that. He's been a television sportscaster for 2 stations and has done radio and television play-by-play for high school and college football and basketball. His video production company, Varsity Video, works with local schools and athletic organizations, producing sporting events and various team and individual highlight videos. He produces and hosts several football and basketball highlight shows that are broadcast on the internet, and you'll tell us how to get there so we can watch. And he's also played the sportscaster in a low-budget comedy movie that I put out about 10 years ago. Have you gotten any royalty checks lately for that one? Okay, Quisha?
Dave Gordon is the Executive Director of the National Sportscaster and Sports Writer Association and Hall of Fame. There, his responsibilities include fundraising, marketing, membership, and community involvement. Gordon is a 24-year-plus veteran in the local television sports market with experience in newspaper and sports radio as well. After his 20th and final year at WXII TV in Winston-Salem, he was voted into NSSA's 2008 North Carolina Sportscaster of the Year. In addition to his NSSA duties, he served as a sideline reporter for Wake Forest football on the Wake Forest IMG Sports Network and oversees the Atlantic Coast Sports Media Association.
Okay, let's give them a round of applause. How many of you out here would you call yourself pretty big sports fans? Okay, that's a good number. I wonder, when you all were younger, can you talk about what your relationship was with sports? And then talk about what it feels like when you sort of think about, okay, now I have a job where I do this for a living.
Okay. It's kind of interesting. I've only been in the television business for 6 years. So when the radio folks were talking about the razors and stuff, I had no idea what they were talking about. And my background is really in news. And it's kind of interesting. It's important that I tell you this part because it was never my ambition or my goal to do sports. And I think that's kind of important to note because you just never know where your career will take you. And I often, when I talk to students, talk about the comfort zone. And I can tell you when my 2 male managers took me out to lunch a year and a half ago and said, we see a role that you could excel in, I left that comfort zone. I was really comfortable being a news reporter, but I was up for the challenge. So I know so many people, probably you're going to get the answer, they've been dreaming about this since they were 3. That was not the case for me, and I just think that is interesting. With that being said, I am a huge sports fan. Grew up outside of Philadelphia. My brother and my dad bleed Eagles green. So I'm one of those dirty Philadelphia fans, I guess you could say. But along with that, I love football and I love college basketball. This has been the busiest week of my career down here, and it's about to get busier. So it is really, really fun. And sometimes when I'm on the sideline of a high school football game, it is cool to say, you know what, this is a pretty good day at work. This is fun, and people are happy, and that's really, really refreshing. So.
Well, you asked how we got involved. Well, I played sports, as a kid, just like a lot of people played football, basketball, and baseball. And of course, I always hoped it would take me somewhere, but I couldn't hit the curveball. So baseball ended up being out after my senior year of high school. And football, I was a wide receiver, and I went up to catch a pass once, and someone came in and hit my ribs. And I said, well, maybe football's not quite it for me. So I did play basketball, and actually had, I would say, a pretty successful high school career, but high school. So when I attended college, I did try out for the team. I was, semi-recruited, but it's Division III, so you were paying anyway. So, the coach said, yeah, come on out. And during the tryouts, the very last tryout, the assistant coach came up to me and asked, Coach wants to see you in his office. Can you collect all the, the towels and everything and the dirty laundry and bring it on up? I was like, well, okay, I'm sure. So I did that, and the coach kind of sat me down and said, well, we only have 12 uniforms, so we can only keep 12 players. You're number 13. So that was the end of my playing days. But I still wanted to be involved with sports and the like. So I was very fortunate. I got a chance right away to write for the school newspaper, and just kind of developed from that. And in a small school, you get opportunities. Someone says, "Oh, I read that article in the paper. You want to do something for the TV station?" And the next thing you know, I'm on the TV station doing sports, and I did that for the last 3 years of my career there. And then just when you get out, you're like, well, what am I going to do? I mean, I know you guys are asking the same question. I really wasn't 100% sure, but my first job was freelance writing for a couple newspapers in Pittsburgh. And I was writing everything. I mean, I was going to school board meetings, but I was also doing like Friday Night Football and stuff. So that was a little more interesting. But the first time they gave me a press pass to go in and see the Pittsburgh Pirates, and I go in the locker room, and there's Barry Bonds and Bobby Bonilla and Andy Van Slyke, and I don't know if those names mean anything to everybody, but I'm sure some of these guys know them. I was hooked, and so I just kind of continued on from there, and got a chance to work at a couple television stations, and just got out of it for a while. I started doing theater, and I couldn't do both of them with the schedule and working at nights, and theater could take you out of town for 5 or 6 weeks. So, but since I've kind of stopped doing that, at least being on the road and living in one place, I got back into sports production, and I do a lot with that in terms of doing high school and college games, and especially highlight videos and things like that.
First of all, thank you for inviting me to be here today. Like Michael, I grew up playing all the sports, and our house was the house where the whole neighborhood came to play football, basketball, baseball, hockey. Anytime it snowed or we got icing, we strapped the skates on and played hockey in the yard, in the driveway, and even when there wasn't any, we used to break all the garage windows with slap shots with the tennis ball. But a lot of it, I think, is timing. I remember my first Major League Baseball game. I was 7 years old. I grew up an hour outside of Boston. Boston Red Sox went to the World Series that year as 100-1 shots to win the American League pennant. I remember being in third grade, and I had the transistor radio in my pocket and the cord up through my sleeve, and I had the earpiece in my ear listening to Game 1 of the World Series. And I thought it was the coolest thing that you could make a living writing or talking about sports. I started writing for my local paper, writing sports as a 15-year-old junior in high school, $5 a story and 10 cents a column inch. So I tried to write really long stories to make more money. Was really interested in radio. I did radio in college. First time I ever got on an airplane was to go do a 2-game Syracuse University basketball road trip to Detroit and Illinois State. It was finals week. Usually we had 2 students at the student radio station. We would switch off and do play-by-play one half and color the other half. I was the only one who could go during finals week because I knew that's what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And then I really wanted to get into TV after taking news and production classes in college. It took me a long time. I spent 4 years as a substitute teacher, teaching 4th through 12th grades. I still wrote for my local newspaper through college and out. Did PR for a local semi-pro football team, and finally I had been out of school for almost 4 years. I got myself through the radio station I was working for, got myself a season press pass to Providence College basketball games. And while at one of the games, I went up to the sports director at the NBC station. I said, I'm kind of desperate. I want to get into TV. I know I'm not in college, so I can't be an intern, but do you guys take volunteers? And he said, call the weekend sports guy. I think he's looking for somebody. And I came to know this in myself later in my career. I called the guy up and I said, is there anything? And he said, yeah, great, when can you start? Because it's free help for him. But you know what? I put in 1,100 hours over 9 months for free. And he went to the news director and said, this guy knows what he's doing. I think we should hire him. And so I was hired as an associate producer in sports for $5.45 an hour. And I thought that was the greatest thing ever. My first full-time job was here in Winston-Salem 4 years later, 20 years at WXII. And then this is the other part of the industry that you should also know about. 20 years, at age 48, I worked Thanksgiving night, 2008, had 6 days off, and on the 5th of those days, my news director called and said, sorry to bother you on your time off, but the general manager wants to know if you'd come in and talk to him today. And I went, So I went in, and he said, Dave, as you know, your contract is up at the end of January. We're not going to renew it. Here's a little parting gift. Thanks for 20 years. See you later. 48 years old. I know no one in local TV is going to hire me now, because they don't hire 48-year-olds for the most part. So then it was, what do I want? What do I do with the rest of my life? And believe in karma, believe whatever it is you believe in. 2 months later, I find out I'm elected North Carolina Sportscaster of the Year through the National Sportscasters and Sports Writers Association. I attended the awards weekend that next May, and the board president said, why don't you apply for our executive director job? It's open. And my exact words to him were, I'm not sure what I want to do when I grow up yet. And the more I thought about it, it was a way to stay involved in sports and media. And I interviewed for the job, ended up getting it, and that was 5.5 years ago, and that's what I'm doing now. So, sports there are a lot of trade-offs. You work holidays, weekends, nights, while all your friends are going out and having a good time. But if you love sports and love what you do, as Tracy said in the last panel, it's for you. But just know the realities are there are a lot of other trade-offs that you'll have to make.
Well, like Michael and Dave, I too, if there was a ball involved, I was playing it growing up, but I didn't right away want to be a sportscaster, and of course, because I had dreams of playing pro, like most do now. But that quickly became, I played in college, but I quickly knew that wasn't for me. And so I kind of, looking back now, I had a tendency of being in this field because I used to always imitate Howard Cosell. Again, I'm dating myself. And whenever
Could you
I
do
would,
that now?
I wouldn't want to do it right now. It'd be embarrassing. But whenever I would watch a game on TV, I would draw up a piece of paper and actually score the game. Like I would write down all the lineups and everything. That was me, that geeky kid. And so it actually paid off because once I got into high school, I thought I was going to be an architect. But I took an elective in journalism and ended up being the editor-in-chief of our high school newspaper. And went on to major. Again, I thought I wanted to be a journalist, but like most teenagers, 17 at the time, I did my research and found out that PR people make more money than journalists do, at least they did at the time. And as a teenager, you don't know any better. You just think, I'm going to go after the job where I can make the most money. So I ended up dual majoring in public relations and journalism and continued to get involved. And they've talked about it. And I believe Professor Lipscomb mentioned it as well. Get involved, because when I was in college, I did broadcast games. I was a DJ at the radio station. I was an editor with the newspaper. Whatever, I ended up officiating in intramural games. Whatever I could do, I did that, so that when I left, I had a resume full, like I had been in the field for 3 or 4 years. Because if you don't do those things, the degree and your GPA are only going to take up one line on your resume. How else are you going to fill up that resume to get a job out of college? So you really do have to get involved. Identify the things that you're good at, what you have a passion for. Like, sorry Liz, not you, but these guys, we all had passion for sports. And you'll never work a day in your life. Because in spite of the setbacks, yeah, you work nights and weekends. So my friends stopped calling me, asking me if you want to go out. Because I got in this in my low 20s, but when I was at work, I loved every minute of it. I'm sitting press row watching basketball, and I'd work a triple header, and then I'd go home and grab a bowl of cereal for dinner at 11 o'clock at night, and I'm watching a West Coast basketball game. So you're in the right job when you just never get enough.
My question is for Liz. What are some of the challenges you face being a woman and being a sports reporter?
How'd I know that question was coming? You know, I feel like I've been very, very fortunate. Again, I've only been the news anchor at WFMY for 9 or 10 months now. And I have never had an instance where somebody said something derogatory or disrespected me. So I feel like what a blessing. So many women have, this is common now that a woman's in sports. So that makes my job really, really easy. That being said, just because people haven't said it to me, I'm sure that a lot of people, I mean, I just admitted I didn't want to really do sports. This was presented to me. So is this just another blonde chick doing sports? I'm sure that that's maybe even been talked about by my coworkers. Again, I've never heard it, but I know that that exists. And what I will say about that is, yep, I'm a blonde chick talking about sports. There's a lot more to me. And I'm confident that when I give a sportscast or when I open my mouth and start to talk, that I can earn people's respects in other ways. So I'm okay if people think that, because I'm confident that there is more to me, and I'm going to show you that. So I think it's a matter of confidence, security, and you know, you can combat those things.
And just to build on that, could you all just tell us a brief story, just to give our students and the people in the audience an idea of the preparation that might go into one part of your job?
When I do a basketball or football game, I rely on guys like Kyle, because the sports information director, especially at a college, it's a lot harder for high school, you know, will put out basically everything you need to know, especially if you're doing play-by-play, you know, and you still want to prep by talking to the coaches. You really want to know what teams you're going to be talking about, so you want to see previous games that they've played, whether in person or, you know, at least on television. One of the worst things that comes up is like players' names, you know, pronouncing them correctly. You want to get that right. So there's a lot of prep going in, like for play-by-play or any kind of production where you're going to do a full game. But you rely on other people, you know, phone calls to coaches and things like that. Sometimes they have to be prearranged. But so, Coach, can you tell me what kind of offense you're going to run or what kind of defense you're going to come out with? Oh, no, I can't tell you that, because, you know, he doesn't want the other team to know, you know. And so there's, you know, challenges like that. But knowing what you're doing and just researching it, I think research is probably the key word there for me anyway, for when I prep for something.
When I was in TV, and I've been out for a little over 6 years, so Liz, it may have changed since the dark ages when I was there. I would typically get in 2 o'clock, 2:30 in the afternoon, plan out my 6 o'clock sportscast. That's after, of course, reading the morning newspaper, another dinosaur. And, you know, if you're in sports, that's all you do. That you consume a lot of it. Having said that, you should be a good reporter first. I was a news hound. I love news, but sports is what I enjoyed, so that's why I became a sportscaster. So anyway, so 2:30, 3 o'clock, you start planning out your, at one point it was 4.5 minutes at 6 o'clock. Now it's down to a minute and a half, 2 at 6. You know, you'll be lucky to fit in 3, 4 stories until weather goes 30 seconds long showing a T-shirt, and then you lost a third of your sportscast. Not that there's any lingering bitterness. And then you do it again. If you're lucky, you got to go home for dinner after the 6, after you did your show. If not, you'd be going to a game, covering a game, coming back, editing that. Those of us in this size market would typically write all our own material, produce it, edit all the video, and then perform it at 6 and 11.
Well, when I hear the word preparation for a sports information director, and again, just for those of you that may not know, because I didn't know about a person in the sports information until I saw the ad in the paper. And I looked at all the qualifications like, yeah, I can do that. That's me. And I've been doing it ever since. But you serve as the public relations or media relations director for the athletics department. So it is feeding information to the members of the media because we depend on the media to spread the word. We also now have other avenues to send that message ourselves, whether it's through social media. Obviously, we have our own website. We consider our YouTube channel kind of our TV station, and we stream games. So when I think of preparation, I just say you got to be prepared for anything, because I'll be at a tennis match, I'm taking pictures, I'll be at bowling, shooting video, I'll have to take my iPhone and do a post-game interview with our baseball coach. The other day we had a home baseball game, and I was inputting the stats into the computer. That's another thing we're responsible for, is maintaining all those records. So I'm inputting stats, running the scoreboard, doing public address announcing, and also being a DJ, because of course they have to have their music being played in between innings. So you really have to be prepared for anything. So again, since we are talking to students, I would say get as much experience in as many different things as you can. Journalism, to me, provided a foundation, because no matter what you do, even in TV and radio, you have to be able to write. Okay, that is essential. Yes. And it hurts my feelings now when my own kids text me and I'm correcting them and back in there, you need to capitalize that letter, or you missed a comma here. And it's so important to be able to write, but that's just a foundation. Pick up a camera. Make sure you are polishing up on your interview techniques. If someone gives you an opportunity to do something, don't turn it down. Do it. You don't know what that will turn out to. And all the experiences that I had were created because I volunteered doing them. And then it just turned into something bigger. So be prepared, and the way you prepare is just by getting as much experience as you can.
I'll just add quickly, because I agree with everything here. I will say, Kyle, how you mentioned, get involved, do as much as you can. So I'm the sports anchor, but I do shoot games, I edit games, I write everything, I create graphics, I produce my sportscasts. So it's a one-woman show, literally. We're a two-person department. We do have a photographer, producer, but when he's not there, it's all me. So I've done, every single thing there is to do to get the sportscast on television. So you can't be scared to get your hands dirty. You've got to just accept that. And sometimes that really does turn into a grind, but it's also really, really fulfilling. But something else, again, having only been in this role for 10 months now, I probably don't have the knowledge. I don't, live and breathe all these other historic sporting events that probably the rest of the panel has. But Google makes life really easy. And, how to pronounce a name, you can put it in Google. I mean, ESPN does the play-by-play for you. People like Kyle send you the stats. So I look really, really smart because that information is out there for you. You just have to seek it out.
And would you say for our journalism students, they need to be able to learn how to do everything from the technical side to the performance side?
Yeah, learn how to do everything, be willing to do everything. That's a given nowadays.
Yeah, you really have to. I would actually say that even if you wanted to be a newspaper reporter, you need to know how to shoot photos. You need to know how to shoot video. You really need to know how to even do the production side of it, the laying out and everything. With desktop publishing, I've noticed that now. A lot of people have to actually literally know exactly how long their story's going to be so it can line up, and they'll actually know where it's going to fit in the newspaper now. So, production-wise and on air, whether it's radio, television, or newspapers, you really have to know both sides now. You really do.
My next question is, now being seasoned in your careers, what's one thing you would go back and tell your younger self?
It's a good question, right?
What would I tell my young self? Was that the question? That's easy. For me, when I got in, I just wanted to do my job. Focus. I didn't care about public speaking, going out, meeting people in the community. I just wanted to do my job. And the longer I was in the business, I found out how much more important that was. It's also great as students, networking is maybe the most important thing you do other than reading and writing. Because I taught a class last spring at High Point University. Sorry, Carrie. But I taught a sportscasting class, and it was a 3-hour, 20-minute Monday night class, and the first thing I said when I saw it was that long was I could not listen to me for 3 hours and 20 minutes. So what I tried to do was bring in different guest lecturers to talk about a different facet of sportscasting, and 2 of them in a row on consecutive weeks said, and I'm sure you've all heard this, it's not what you know, it's... No. Well, see, they went one step further. They said it's not what you know, it's not who you know. To get a job, it's who knows you. So that tells you how important networking is. You need to get known. You need to show that you can do the job that you want to get hired for. So that would be my advice to my younger self, is get out there and meet more people.
It's a great question. You know, when you stump folks, it's a great question. I guess the way that I'll kind of cop out is make it more philosophical rather than related particular to sports media, is just everything happens for a reason. That's what I would tell my younger self. You know, you always face trials and tribulations in your life and you think that's the end of the world. You know, I had a job, the first job when I saw that job advertisement, I was there for a year, and then, well, long story short, I lost the job, and I was just devastated. So I said, I need a change. Me and my buddy, we took a spring break. I was up in New York at the time. Took a spring break. We stopped in Durham and went to Charlotte and Atlanta. And on the way back from this trip, we said, we should just move down there. And we did. We just packed up and moved down there and came here. And I didn't have a job, so I was just working construction. College degree, some experience, working construction. And again, wondering, why did I even bother going to school? Here, I could have done this job when I was, 17 without an education. But everything happens for a reason. And I had applied for the job at North Carolina Central before I even left New York. And it just so happened I moved to North Carolina in Raleigh at the time, 20 minutes from Durham, when they called me to come in for an interview. So everything happens for a reason. So whatever it is, just know it's going to be all right.
Again, I guess I'm fairly young, although probably some of you think that I look like an old lady. I graduated college in 2009, just to give you an idea. So probably, when I graduated, 22 years old, my plan was to go to Erie, Pennsylvania, and that was Market 148, put 2 years in news reporting there, come to Greensboro, North Carolina, they made me do 3 years, put in 3 years there, and then get to Philadelphia and be in my hometown market, and that's what I could do by 28, boom. I think what I would say is have some faith in the journey. Maybe you want to have it all figured out, and I get that pressure. As college kids at 22, you're supposed to have it figured out, and where do you want to be? What's your 5-year plan? What's your goal? That's overwhelming. So just have some faith in the journey and in the growth that you'll do within your career, because you really don't know where it's going to take you. So just have that open mind. And I guess it does go back to kind of everything happens for a reason, but have an open mind and an open heart as you start out your career.
And unfortunately, I think we are coming to the end of our time on that great question. And I want to just do a couple of quick announcements before we give them a rousing applause. Kiara, could you tell them, when Mr. Brown comes up, we want to give a way for you to be able to send a question. Could you tell them an address where they could send a question? And she's going to be fielding some of those in our next part of the program.
So hello, everybody. My name is Kiara. I'm a JMS sophomore, Journalism Media Studies sophomore, and I'll be handling the Twitter for today's event. So the Twitter handle is at JMSBELLE Media. Again, that's JMSBELLE Media. So I'll take in your questions, anything you want to ask.
Okay, and one just quick plug. First of all, for students from other campuses, make sure you get around and meet some of us at the reception so we can do more collaborative type activities and form some partnerships. Mr. Brock has worked out a way so that college students can go to the NABJ convention at a discounted rate. And this is something we need to talk with him about, our students. And really getting a community of media scholars and scholars from the other disciplines to meet up. So I hope you'll take advantage of the reception to do that. And if anybody has any, you're going to see a video before Mr. Brown speaks, and it was produced on an iPhone by Mikea. If anybody is upgrading their iPhone or their iPad and they're not sure about what to do with the old one, feel free to talk about making a tax-deductible donation and donating to our program, because our students can create really good media with that, if that's something that's lying around. And the other two people I want to thank is my colleagues, Professor Jeffries and Professor Coleman, to use a sports analogy. It's been wonderful planning this event. Whenever I dropped the ball, somebody came along and picked it up, and it's been a real pleasure working with them all year and being able to work with the students in our great department. So before we take a quick break and introduce our next speaker, I would like to give them a rousing applause for their work here today.
5, 4, 3.
And welcome everyone to another edition of Inside the NFL right here on Showtime. I'm James Brown along with three of the most handsome guys.
It gives me great honor, joy, and pleasure to welcome legendary sports broadcaster Mr. James Brown to Bennett College. Mr. Brown is a Washington, D.C. native, graduate of DeMatha High School, and is an esteemed alumnus of the illustrious Harvard University with a degree in American government. While studying at Harvard, Mr. Brown also played basketball and even served as team captain. In the mid-70s, Mr. Brown was drafted to the Atlanta Hawks but fell short of making the roster. However, that will not be the last time he was seen in the sports world. Post-Harvard, Mr. Brown worked in corporate America for 5 years before he found himself back into sports. In 1978, Mr. Brown became an analyst for the Washington, then Bullets, now Wizards, and a year later landed a job with BET Sports as a basketball analyst. In the 80s, Mr. Brown freelanced for WUSA, a CBS affiliate station in Washington, D.C., CBS Sports, and WJLA, an ABC affiliate station in Washington, D.C., all before ultimately landing his full-time position as sportcaster for CBS Sports. In 1996, he was inducted into the Harvard University Hall of Fame. Mr. Brown has covered 2 Winter Olympics, 8 Super Bowls. He's hosted the NFL on Fox show alongside colleagues Terry Bradshaw, Howie Long, and Jimmy Johnson. He's won 3 sports Emmys, an outstanding sports personality, and studio host. He was named Best Studio Host of the Decade by SportsIllustrated.com. He even received the Uncommon Award from Tony Dungy for his uncommon leadership through character and faith. Mr. Brown is the co-founder and principal of the Brown Technology Group, a certified minority-owned and operated information technology company he started with his brother, Terrence Brown. He's also the founding partner of the Washington Nationals. You can catch Mr. Brown hosting NFL Today and Thursday Night Football on CBS Sports. You can also catch him on Inside the NFL on Showtime. As of 2012, Mr. Brown has officially been named special correspondent for CBS Evening News. He also contributes to 60 Minutes, 60 Minutes Sports, CBS Sunday Morning, and CBS This Morning. In addition to all of the amazing contributions that he's made to the sports and business world, he is also a pastor, philanthropist, and author. His book, Role of a Lifetime, is part memoir, part self-help, and it offers values and encouragement to people. Most importantly, he is my Uncle James. He has motivated me. He has encouraged me. He has supported me. And he has shown me that it is possible for me to achieve my dream of becoming a journalist. And today, I hope he will inspire you the way he has always inspired me.
Well, I was going to say, let's give a round of applause, which I beat me to it.
I guess I should start off saying I'm too dark to blush. That was very nice, Mikea. Thank you very much. I love it when they say legendary, old. I know what that is. Go ahead. I'll let you guys start.
All right, so after hearing all of your accomplishments, I know you hear it all the time, does it ever make you feel like, wow, like I really did a lot of stuff, like I'm really legendary James Brown? Like, does it ever sit in like, wow, I did all of this?
Thank you very much for that, Mikey. I appreciate it. No, many years ago, because of my spiritual foundation, I refuse to allow the blessings that have happened to affect me in terms of thinking that I'm any better than anybody else or that I have arrived, because I always want to maintain an attitude that there's still more to come. There's a lot more that I want to do until the time that my time is up here on earth. But I am extremely humbled. I'm very thankful. I had some great parents. I'm one of 5 kids in a family. My mother and father, God bless them, were very hardworking parents, high school educated, and I'm sure not unlike many of you, parents who worked extremely hard to give you an opportunity to go further in life than they did. So I am always mindful of the sacrifices that my mother made. I mean, this morning at the Charter Day service that was held, Reverend Raquel Gill was flat out awesome in reminding how many people have poured into us, Dr. Fuse Hall, and I always stay mindful of that. Even at this advanced age and stage in my life, I'm still very mindful of that. So I'm very thankful, but I want to make certain that excellence continues to be the target that I shoot for, no matter what, and continue to enjoy the journey. I hope that answers the question. Hey, but first of all, let me just say thank you guys so very much for having me here today. I am truly thankful to be here. And chatting with Dr. Fuse Hall earlier, I had no idea how significant this day would be for me as I got a chance to see what this university, what this college is all about, how many very talented women and faculty are here. And trust me, you've got a strong public relations agent now, Ms. Foster and everyone else. I'm a dinosaur when it comes to social media. And when people were talking about tweeting, I went out and bought a bunch of doves and pigeons to kind of send out information. So I guess I can use my social media now. But I'm going to let the world know how awesome this university is, this college is, with the talent here. And I thank you very much.
In doing some of the research and preparing for today, I've seen several times where you spoke about success and maintaining success and achieving success. Can you talk to our audience about your points that you always want to hit?
Set me up, give me a cue.
Being on time.
Ah, those points. Okay, got you. Those points. So what Professor Chianti is referring to is, before I got into broadcasting, I worked in corporate America. I worked at Xerox and Eastman Kodak, and that was all a result of me not realizing my dream of playing professional basketball. Even though I had a great high school career at DeMatha High School All-America, recruited by over a couple of hundred colleges, opted to go to Harvard because of what my mother and father, God bless them, were saying about the academic foundation being the key for success in the game of life. I still wanted to play professional basketball. In high school, I'm sure you saw from those black and white photos, I was knocking in, as my colleagues would know, I was weighing about 195 pounds then. Right now, I'm knocking in at about 205 pounds. So when basketball didn't work out for me, I started working in corporate America with Xerox and Eastman Kodak. And very valuable lessons learned in working in corporate America, lessons that applied no matter what environment you're in. And I'll just tick them off without getting into my usual speech about it. But there was an executive at Xerox who talked to all of us new employees about understanding 7 ingredients to be successful in the game of life. And it was entitled The Objective and Subjective Criteria for Success. Under the objective, there was only one criterion, and that was to be able to do the job. I was in sales. That means meeting your quota each and every month, exceeding it preferably. One criterion. But many people get bounced out of the work world because of not understanding the elements under the subjective category that I heard some of the local reporters talking about are very important to keep in mind when you're working in any environment. And quickly, I think the 7 are communication skills, understanding that communication skills consist of speaking, writing, and most importantly, listening. Number 2, being prompt, on time for the job, all the time, because being prompt and on time makes a statement about you that you're dependable, that you're reliable, that you have respect for other people's jobs. The third point might have been your dress and attire. Recognizing the environment that you're in. Kerry Charles was up here neatly attired. That is the professional uniform in a work environment, certainly in the media, and he represents that. And the lesson that I learned there when I got cut by the Atlanta Hawks, this big-time Harvard alum sent me for a job at IBM, and I'm a ball player. Nobody talked to me about the importance of being dressed neatly. So I go over to the job, and I got this humongous afro sitting out about 10 feet high. I got these thick mutton chop sideburns. Ms. Foster, I had a velvet blue Bama bow tie on, powder blue shirt, plaid blue suit, thick stack heel shoes, and a shoulder bag. I looked a mess. And so the boss came out of his office and he said, okay, James Brown, Harvard University, 3.5 grade point average, captain of the basketball team, Harvard Speakers Forum. Wow, that's a pretty good candidate. And he looked over at me and he turned to his assistant and asked, well, where's James Brown? And I stood up, here I is. And of course, I didn't say it that way. He called me back into the office and he read me the Riot Act to let me know that I was not professionally attired. And had he not known the person who sent me there, he would have gone through a perfunctory interview and bounced me out of there in about 5 minutes because I failed to understand what was appropriate in a work environment. So your dress and attire makes a big statement. Being able to work in a diverse environment, your people skills. And in this environment today, it is critically important to make certain that we see the strengths that are represented in our diversity as opposed to the narrow, bigoted mindset of thinking because somebody doesn't look like you or bring the same things to the table that they aren't meaningful contributors to the team. The other thing was intellectual curiosity, a desire to continue to learn. We should always be in the mode of wanting to learn because to the degree that your colleagues and your superiors recognize that you have a hunger and a thirst to learn as much as possible, you will always be viewed as a go-to person that folks would want to talk with. So that was critically important. And 6th was overcoming adversity and difficulties. The Bible says that into every life there will be trials and tribulations. As I was listening to Liz talk about maybe some of the things that she has not encountered as a blonde woman in the business, or as Tracy McCain, is that her name, was talking about being an African American woman, you know, whether the difficulties are overt or subtle, they always will be there. But the philosophy that you stand on, the principles, and as a Christian minister, my foundation is absolutely my faith foundation, period. That has been the foundation which has helped me to overcome a number of challenges in this business and in life. And then finally, you can have fun when you're winning. When you're winning and doing things well, you can have fun, and you ought to have fun in a job. And I did hear Liz say that she thoroughly, and Tracy McCain definitely said that she passionately loves her job. So hopefully those were the points that you were talking about. Yes, sir. And I'm going to take some questions.
Okay, so for young journalists, when they're trying to establish themselves in the industry and they are banking on that one internship with that big, whatever company it is, they're banking on it. So just like when you were in Harvard and you were playing basketball and you were banking on making it to the NBA and you were going to be a pro basketball player. So when you found out that you were cut, that was a time in your life where you felt like, well, I'm not going to say how you felt. How did you feel when that happened?
That was an extremely difficult time because that was my passion, that was my dream, to play professional basketball. I had it all mapped out. I was going to play 10 years. He talked about professional baseball. I was going to play basketball for 10, 12 years, take that capital and move into some type of entrepreneurial pursuit. But all of that was cut short when the Atlanta Hawks cut me the last day of camp. And it hurt, and I cried. And when I flew back home, I went home and I hid in the house for about 2 weeks because I was extremely embarrassed. But when I stopped to think about why I got cut, you can listen to your peers as, oh man, the coach, showed favoritism because he liked this other guy. You can hear all those excuses, but you know your own heart. and you know what you did and didn't do. And when I looked myself in the mirror, I realized that I did not work as hard to stay on top as I did to get to the top. The Bible says, why be concerned about the splinter in your brother's eye when you got a plank in your own eye? So I wasn't going to be pointing a finger of blame at anybody else. I pointed the finger of blame at me, because for the 4 years in college, unlike in high school where I worked diligently, studying assiduously to be the best player and student and person that I could be, I got complacent and rested on my laurels. And those 4 years hurt, because ultimately there's going to be a due date. And when I got to camp, while I knew I had the talent to play, I hadn't put in the effort to improve and get better. And our high school coach used to say, the best players are made in the off season. And I'm sure you guys and ladies can draw the corollary in terms of whatever it is you're doing in school or anything else. The best, whatever it is you want to be, is being made now, while you are sacrificing and sharpening your skills and learning from an outstanding faculty and staff here. You're preparing while people may not be paying attention to you. But one of the things I noticed in that montage is a sermon that I give that's called Depth Before Height. So what you're in effect doing, and what I didn't do at that time, was I didn't properly prepare a solid foundation. You have to prepare a strong, solid foundation. In the language of architecture, the Washington Monument is the tallest building in Washington, D.C., stands 555 feet high, comprises some 30,000 blocks, and weighs 90,000 tons. But that wonderful edifice that's known the world over, and I use an example figuratively about how the winds and storms and rains beat against it, much like challenges in life. But the building stands tall, not because of what we can see in the superstructure, but because of the foundation that was built. The workers had to go down 4 stories deep and plant a firm foundation before they could build up. And whatever the depth is that you build to, that determines what the height is going to be. You can't come back later and add to that. You've got to establish the depth first. So what I didn't do was to establish the proper depth in order to capitalize on that opportunity. And I vowed from that failure in life, my Kia, that I would never allow an opportunity to pass me by that I was not prepared for. And I think it's reflected in the opportunities that have come. And I've had a number of failures, and it has not been an easy road. But with faith and putting in the work, it certainly has worked out. Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Well, so let's say if, somebody, a journalist applied for an internship and you have to go through several rounds. Let's say they made it to the last round and they didn't get picked. And I know some people are emotional people, some people get in funks, and some people are discouraged and they don't want to go on. What would you say to a young journalist who didn't make the final cut for that big internship that they were dreaming about? What would you say to encourage them to get out of that funk and just pursue other things?
If they are passionate about what they want to do, you're going to hear a lot more no's than you will hear yeses. There may be a lot of doors slammed in your face before that one door that is open for you. I forget which one of my colleagues here was giving a story about how they volunteered to do something for the job. You know what? If you can't get a paid internship, people want free help all the time. So you go and volunteer in some arena that will help you to get some skill, some experience that will lead to the objective you're trying to accomplish. I know when I started working in Washington, D.C. in television, I started doing high school football games, logging those games, standing on the sidelines on a Saturday morning, raining, to go back to the station to put a piece together as I was being taught and was learning the craft for a public affairs program. But that start, doing that and willing to volunteer the time, is what helped to lay the foundation for success later in life. So yeah, you might lose that one opportunity, but if you persist and showing some aggressiveness and determination, there are a range of opportunities out there. It may not be the one that you were pursuing, but there are significant other opportunities out there that you can get to get your foot in the door and show, like Dave did, that you have what it takes. Somebody will notice that stick-to-itiveness, that perseverance, that never say die attitude. Somebody will see that, and it will mean something to them to give you an opportunity. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
You took a stand and used your pulpit to speak out against domestic violence with the Ray Rice incident, following the Ray Rice incident. Can you speak about what it took for you to get to that point, to speak on it, and how your corporation viewed it before, if you brought it to them before, or after, if you didn't?
You know, this is where I have so much respect for Mr. Paul Brock in terms of how he explained the history of the NABJ and how people lost their jobs in convening and birthing, if you will, NABJ. So because of efforts like Mr. Brock and so many others, you know, we're all, and you're going to be blessed even more so, to be able to stand on the shoulders of what they've done. And as Reverend Gill said this morning, you have a responsibility to articulate when you see something that is not right and you feel passionate about it. You have a responsibility to speak out properly. That was not by design on my part at all. It happened as a result. I'm pretty much, Professor Keontae, a cause-themed, cause-related, cause-mission kind of person. I get behind efforts, and I don't do many things, but those things that I'm passionate about. And my business partner, if you will, a woman by the name of Monica Hawkins, and we're church members together, and our spouses allow us to work together. You know, that's another whole story. I'll get to that later. But she got me involved with the Verizon Foundation that was headed up by a wonderful Christian sister, Rose Kirk. And it was to bring more awareness to the issue of domestic violence and trying to make a serious dent. I had no idea how pervasive that problem is today, and it cuts across every spectrum, every piece of the spectrum. It's in the church, it's in academia. I had no idea. When I went down to Austin, Texas for my orientation, there are two buildings down there. One is the National Hotline Center for women to call into. Next door is a teen hotline center for teenagers. And so I put the headset on, and I'm sitting next to the ladies they call counselors, listening to these women call in and talk about how frightened they were, and to hear the boyfriend, significant other, husband come in. I'm not going to get graphic, but to physically abuse them. I took the headset off, walked over to the window, turned my back to the ladies there, and started crying. It hurt me that badly. When I travel around the country and talk to a lot of coaches perhaps outside of the home, and in many cases more so than the home, have a great influence on young men. But young men in the game of football and so many others, they're taught to resolve problems by smashing things, busting through. The DNA is that we're wired to not show emotion, you got to bow up and all these things that are more attack oriented. So after going through that for 2 years and recognizing that men will have to play the most significant role in addressing this problem by looking at themselves in the mirror. And I feel it even goes down to the language when we talk about, oh, you throw the ball like a sissy, you act like a little girl. Well, what we're doing is subconsciously demeaning the value of women. And women are exceedingly valuable. They talk about men being strong. Please, we can't even compare to women on a whole number of fronts in that regard. And that's real world. So as I continue to be oriented, my assistant, she would help me make certain that I wasn't subconsciously using language that was a reflection of how we have been wired in this society when it comes to women, as opposed to absolutely respecting them totally. So when we get to that issue with Ray Rice and the like, and I had spoken on the same topic before, the year before, when Javon Belcher, the player with the Kansas City Chiefs, killed his girlfriend, Cassandra Perkins. And it's important to mention the name because way too often we don't hear the name of the woman mentioned in this. There was another human being involved in this. When I gave that same commentary there, it was on the NFL Today, but Thursday Night Football, prime time, the whole 9 yards, it just moved me. And all I wanted to say was that men need to speak up and do something. When they see another man engaged in this, we need to talk about that. My brother, that's not right. Let's help me understand we got that kind of relationship so that we can make a dent in that, because many men have grown up in a household seeing that kind of behavior, and that's all they know, and they think that's right, and it ain't right. And we have to do something about that. The Bible says, Christ treats the church as a bride. Well, we're supposed to die for our wives. So we need to treat them the same way that we want to be treated as well too. So that's why I spoke in that. Now, I took some flack. I'm okay with that because I spoke my mind, and my bosses understand that I rarely give commentaries. But when I feel passionate about something, Brother Brock, I'm glad that I was able to go to the bosses and say, I need to say something about this. Like Miss McCain was saying as well too, I need to speak on this because it's meaningful to me. Rush Limbaugh took me to task the following day with a scathing commentary about it. I consider that a major compliment, coming from him, because what he was saying was that I was trying to chickify football. Give me a break, man. That couldn't be intellectually. Where in the world was he coming from with that remark? Had nothing about chickifying football. I'm talking about how we treat our women, period. Enough said. You get me passionate on that one.
Okay, so before we get into a few questions from the audience and from Twitter, okay, so your degree is in American government, and now you are in broadcast. So you didn't have, what type of formal training did you go through in order to become the sportscaster that you are and the television personality that you are today?
So what my niece is saying is that I'm a failure, right? I didn't do anything with my degree, right? No, because I was thinking about becoming an attorney, which is why I was in American government, because I was thinking of pursuing something along those lines. But the good thing about getting a good college education is that it provides a good dictionary degree for you to go in any direction. And I'm sure Dr. Fuse Hall and others, Ms. Foster, can probably tell you that many people don't right out of college get into the field that they're ultimately going to wind up in. They may change jobs 2 or 3 times or change professions 2 or 3 times as you pursue whatever your passion is, or as it becomes crystal clear what your real passion is, as I heard my colleagues talking about earlier. When I got cut by the Atlanta Hawks, I was going to go to law school, but because I had been cut late in the season for admission to law school, I wound up working 6 months in local government and then with Xerox in the corporate America, and my attention turned to more entrepreneurial pursuits. And it just so happened that a local personality had me on his TV show and made me aware that there was an opening in the sports department at the local UHF station to do basketball. And of course, I still missed the game, and I thought this was a way, in some ancillary capacity, I could still satisfy my need to be around sports. And I went and auditioned for the job and was blessed to get the job. And then once I got the job, I saw that this was really a career path that could lead to a number of things. And where I am all these years later is kind of blending an interest and a desire. Not that I'm some charter member of Mensa, because I'm not. I worked hard in school. I was not a gifted student, but I would not let anybody outwork me. But I saw there was an opportunity, pretty much like Liz was saying. She didn't look to go into sports, but I thought, what could I do to stay intellectually stimulated? And I certainly wanted to do a range of sports, but then I also saw the opportunity, because I was curious about the way the world worked, to be able to do something in news as well. And why should there be any restriction in terms of what I can do? Dave and I were talking, one of the things that news directors or executives like about people who've been in sports is we're accustomed to handling curveballs thrown our way, because sports is not scripted. You have to react to whatever you see. If the game goes into overtime, if it's a Villanova upsetting Georgetown, whatever. So those kinds of experiences over and over really lend themselves well to doing news, to be prepared for a breaking story and being able to react comfortably to whatever is taking place. And that's what's led to me being able to be more broad-based and do some things in news and entertainment as well too, and I thoroughly enjoy it. Did I answer your question though, honestly? Okay, I hope so.
I think we're going to take some of the Twitter
questions to Twitter.
Okay.
And from the audience?
Yes. Well, if we can do an audience question first, if somebody would like to come up to the
We have the microphones on each side.
I just want to say you're the best. I would never guess that's how you started, because you're the best, man.
Hey, thank you very much. That's my relative from down here in the state of North Carolina, right? No, my brother, thank you very much. Praise God. Thank you very much. Oh, it is Brown? Oh, so then I'm real then, right? Okay. Yes. Somebody else? Come on now, I'll play school teacher and call on somebody if they don't raise their hand. Okay, go ahead. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I know you were speaking on how you went to Harvard. So my question is for people who want, well, for African American students who want to pursue maybe a graduate or undergraduate degree from Harvard, can you tell me what life was like as far as like the academics? Was it challenging for you? And if so, how did you overcome it? And what advice could you give for people who want to go to an Ivy League or a major PWI but are like discouraged from going?
I'm a firm believer. I understand that, and actually the staff and some of the board of directors will probably be better suited to answer that question than me. But what I found is it really doesn't make any difference where you go to school, is how passionate are you about learning everything that you can from that person and then applying it in the game of life. From the people with whom I've talked to, from Professor Jeffries to Professor Chiante, Professor Lipscomb, you guys have some very talented faculty here. My advice is wherever you are, absorb everything you can from them. Be a sponge, and to make certain that you can synthesize it, digest it, and then apply it. You know, when we talk about studying the Bible, we talk about context rules, you know, understanding the context and what's the meaning or the interpretation, and then what's the application. Well, it's the same process in terms of school. And then showing that kind of hustle and promise and determination will certainly speak volumes for those who are in the admissions department of any of those schools. They want to see, what did you do to stand out or to show that you're a serious student? One of the best pieces of advice as I've heard is from my good friend, Coach Tony Dungy, who's one of the finest people you'll ever meet, a wonderful man. And the advice he was giving his football players applies in the game of life. He said that his first speech when he gave it to the Tampa Bay Bucks was the same first speech he gave to the Indianapolis Colts, talking about if you're champions on the football field only and not in the game of life, you're not really a champion. And I'm not looking for people who do extraordinary things. I want people who do the ordinary things extraordinarily well. Internalize the fundamentals, master those, and become good. If I can give one other sports example, I know when I first started playing basketball, horrible. What's your first name? Chelsea. Horrible basketball player. As a matter of fact, when I was introduced to the student body on the team, we were supposed to run full court, make a layup, and stand on the baseline to be introduced. I blew the layup. Nobody was defending me. But the reason the coach liked me was because I paid rapt attention to whatever he had to say and went and worked on it. And just like in the world of education, you know, you talk about in learning in an academic environment, there the 4 stages of learning, the same as in basketball or any sport. The first stage is when you are unconsciously incompetent. You don't know what you don't know. Okay? Then you move to stage 2 where you become conscious of your incompetence. And you start working on the fundamentals, you know, not just rote memorization, but you got to work to get better. The third stage you come to is you become consciously competent, but it's kind of more mechanical in terms of what you're doing. But that's okay. You keep working at it, because when you do, you move to the 4th stage, which is then you become subconsciously competent. You don't have to think about it. People say, well, it's second nature. No, excuse the vernacular, it ain't second nature. You worked hard at it so that it's become internalized, so that you don't have to think about it, because it's second nature now. Just like football or basketball players or soccer players, they work on the fundamentals daily, so when they see a situation, they can just react instinctively. You follow what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Okay. Next question.
I wanted to ask you.
Oh, Brother Brown, okay.
Oh, yeah, no. I know the relationship you had with Terry Bradshaw. I read about that. It's a dynamic relationship, and I really appreciate that story. But what I want to ask you, how do you keep a balance and a respect factor between you and your coworkers that are not Christians, that live the lifestyle that may not be pleasing to Christ? How do you keep that respect and stay away from being judgmental?
Great question.
Yeah.
First of all, I don't go around trying to beat people over the head with the Bible. I try to be an excellent living epistle. It's just who I am. If an opportunity is created where they want to talk about it no more, all day long. But I respect whatever that other person's position is. We live in a pluralistic society. People can choose whatever they want. For me, I think I've done my homework and my personal search. I know what the truth is, and the truth is the Word of God, period. So I carry myself that way. And it's interesting when I went to, and I'm not going to call any names, and when I went to Fox, my biggest prayer going out there first was that I would be prepared for Hollywood, to make certain that I would stay grounded in who I am and whose I am, and not be pulled astride, because the temptations are there. And a lot of folks call me square. I'm cool with that. I'll be a fool for Christ all day long, because I know the foolishness of Christ is wiser than the wisdom of the world. So I'm cool with that. But it's interesting, when a lot of folk got in difficulties and troubles, then they want to come talk to you about, hey man, can you pray for me? Or can you talk? So, that's where the rubber meets the road. Now, you speak of Terry Bradshaw. When we talk about one of the points that Professor Keontae was asking me about in terms of those 7 ingredients, working in a diverse environment, most people tend to think, well, that's white folks working with black folks. No, it's whatever. And I maintain humorously, because Terry and I are great friends, and I never miss an opportunity to bust his chops. Nobody had a bigger challenge in America working with somebody who was a little different than me working with the self-described lovable redneck Terry Bradshaw. Exactly. And here's how. Day one of our football show, this is a true story, so it kind of gives you, so we're sitting at the desk, and people are asking, what kind of show is Fox going to have? They don't know anything about football. Who's going to host the show? Is it going to be Bart Simpson? So we're sitting up there, and the producer says, 2 minutes to air. So Terry considers himself to be the studio veteran. He looks down the dais, and he sees Jimmy Johnson, who had just been fired by the Cowboys, given a $2 million severance package. We should all be fired that way. So he looks down at Jimmy, and he says, Coach, I know you're just getting fired from the football field, but I tell you what, in case you get a little nervous on the football field, in the studio, I want you to take a little bit of this Carmex. It was in a little tube like Vaseline. Put just a little bit of this Carmex on your finger and on your lips, and you won't get cotton mouth. Minute 30 to air, he turns to Howie Long. Howie Long, big handsome stud, 13 years with the Raiders, 8 times a Pro Bowler. He says, big boy, I know this is your first TV job full time. Take just a little bit of this Carmex and put it on your lips and everything. You see where I'm going with this, true story. So he puts it on his lips, 30 seconds to air. Terry takes it, puts it on his finger, on his lips, and he puts it back in his pocket. He doesn't offer me any. I said, redneck, how come you didn't offer the brother any? He pulls it back out. He looks at my lips, looks at the Carmex, says, you're going to need a whole handful of this for your lips, And we came on the air with them laughing at me, and they did it for 12 years. Now, thank God I was born again Christian, because I could have reacted stereotypically and pulled out my switchblade, but I didn't do that, So we're all good. But that's the relationship that Terry and I have.
I know God gave me a word the other day that about branding. And he said, when you see the Nike swoosh, you know it's Nike. You see the Mercedes emblem, you know it's Mercedes. And God was saying to me, they'll know my brand by the way you live. And that's what I see in you, JB.
Praise God.
I see it in you. Thank you, dude.
Praise God. Hey, and again, I'm not trying to beat anybody over the head, but Mr. Brown asked the question. For me, because I've gone through, and maybe, if it's appropriate, we'll talk about some of the challenges, but this has not been an overnight success thing. I've been at this for a minute, and I've faced my difficulties. But what I learned as I was growing in the Word in a good Bible teaching church, there are scriptures that I have inscribed on the tablets of my heart that help me through anything. Psalm 75, 6 and 7 is one of the best. Psalm 91, Joshua 1:8, which defines success for me. Even though it's Old Testament, the application is still the same. This book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night, to observe to do according to all that is written within, that thou mayest make thy way prosperous, and then thou shalt have good success. And then at the end of the day, no matter what challenges come your way, people may not like you for whatever reason. Psalm 75 and 6 and 7 were clear to me that promotion cometh neither from the east, nor the west, nor the south, God is a judge. He putteth down one and setteth up another. And as long as I'm firmly staying in his word, diligently seeking him, he says, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, trust in the Lord in all thy ways and lean not into thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he will direct thy path. So that's perfect for me, so I know I can manage through any storm or any challenge that's thrown my way. Amen. So, yes, ma'am, Dr. Fusehall. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Not unlike what some of my colleagues have done as well, too. You know, I think that there are any number of opportunities that can, and I didn't seek this, but that can be outgrowths of the path that you pursue to just remain open-minded, wide-eyed, and alert to opportunities that can come your way. I got my start in corporate America working for Xerox and Eastman Kodak, and saw a number of my buddies and ladies going off and pursuing their own things and have done exceedingly well with it. Well, I have an IT background. Admittedly, the high-tech equipment when I was at Xerox was the mimeograph machine. And I understand it's radically changed now. You know, this whole social media thing still blows my mind. I have to turn to the Bennett students to kind of help me with that. But I saw an opportunity with my brother who was a superb salesman with a couple of Fortune 50 companies to get into the IT business ourselves, mostly in staff augmentation. And in the Washington, D.C. area, the government requires major companies partner with minority, women-owned, military vets, et cetera, disabled veterans to do business with them. Rightly so, because a lot of contacts that we have, we can start off as a small business being a sub to a prime company, but there are many contacts and expertise that we can acquire where there are opportunities for those women-owned, minority-owned companies where we can go in and be the prime and bring the sub with us, which is a big company. They would provide the back office support to ensure that we have the ability to do it, but we've got the expertise, the talent, the skill sets, and the know-how to be able to get it done. So that's what we're doing. We've been at it for about 6.5 years. We're on the cusp of taking that next step up and not being just in the government environment, but in the commercial arena as well too. And this is fascinating to me and could very well lay a nice foundation so that she can take over as CEO one day and I can just lay back and chill. So yes, ma'am. Yep. Yes, ma'am.
Hello. Oh, I just kicked the thing. Being young and like just starting out in the news business and kind of finding my way, you were speaking about, you know, the challenges you faced in the business and, you know, throughout life. But I wanted to know, like, what is one of the most challenging that you kind of had to overcome to kind of stay where you are or even like get better than you were?
Wow. There were two significant ones that come quickly to mind, and I'll synopsize. Look, first of all, everybody has challenges. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. There are others that have more significant challenges. And as much as Reverend Gill was driving that point home, I don't shy away from that because as a people, we absolutely have had, still have challenges. Things are better. But to Liz's point, she was saying a lot of people may have the attitude, but they don't articulate it. So early on, one of the biggest challenges for me, I was at CBS the first time. This is my second go around at CBS. My first time I was there, you saw my Kia's piece that I was blessed to host a mid-afternoon Winter Olympics show. And there was a lot of controversy about the host that we had and a lot of debate about that. And I remember going out to dinner with one of the CBS News producers who happened to be white, and we were discussing about why there was so much debate and controversy over the hosts that we have for our Winter Olympics. He got a little inebriated over dinner. I don't drink, so he got inebriated, and then he started getting loose-lipped. And what he slipped with, he was saying, well, you know what? We got a employee in CBS, and I won't call his name because he's still there, and he's a good friend of mine too. good friend. And he says, well, sportscaster A, he doesn't look white. He's got white features. He would be. And then he realized who he was talking to. A dark-skinned Negro with traditional Negroid features, the Negroid nose, lips, the whole 9 yards of skin color, the nappy hair. So I could have, and it hurt that he said that. Now, I could have, if I were very weak in my disposition, could have been affected by that, because to Liz's point again, a lot of decision makers and decision influencers think that way. I talked to a young sister down in Mississippi who's a dark-skinned black woman, and she says, I've trained more of the word she used, I'm so unhip these days, crinkly-haired sisters, with the light features and all of that, and they have moved on past me. But she says, I see your perseverance has paid off, and that's an encouragement to me. So those challenges are there. But again, standing on the word. They may think that way, but I am supposed to do everything that I do excellently as unto the Lord. I heard Kerry Charles say that, he doesn't look to be competing against anybody else. He wants to make certain that excellence is a standard that he goes after. And at the end of the day, it's all still a people game. People need, Kerry talked about there needs to be more communication and conversation. I absolutely agree with that, because to the degree that we have these kind of hard discussions in homogenous groups around people who look like us, there's no diversity, we can't have these hard conversations, no progress. When I was doing college basketball, I remember doing work with Tommy Heinsohn. My older colleagues, they know the name, a former Boston Celtics player. And what our producers were trying to help us understand is, watch our words when we're describing the athletic action, because without fail, you could hear somebody say, oh, what an outstanding, powerful, athletic move. He's talking about a brother, versus, oh my gosh, what a cerebral play by such and such. He was showing on-court smarts. He's talking about a white player. And as we listen and watch the videotape, the second description was a play made by, now I'm showing my age, made by Larry Bird, versus the first play being made by Magic Johnson. And my point to Tommy Heinsohn was, wait a minute, they both made exactly the same play. Why was Bird's play cerebral? Magic's play was animalistic and powerful, and they started to think about that. And I said, also, you're doing Larry Bird a disservice. Just because he's a white ball player doesn't mean he can't make an athletic move. And just because Magic is a black ball player doesn't mean he can't play the game cerebrally. Which, by the way, Magic's second act in terms of what he's doing in the game of life, to me, is better than his first act in basketball. What he's doing is awesome. Because when that brother was doing TV, when he did his late night show, I was blessed to be on one of his late night shows, and people were talking about how he was splitting verbs and tearing up the King's English, and he recognized that before a national audience. But he worked hard to clean up his King's English, and you all have great faculty here, because in this business you better have a good grasp of the King's English and have several words to use to describe the same thing, because it shows your mental dexterity and being able to write well. You got Professor Jeffries here to be able to help you with that. You need to do that. We need to be great writers, because you've got an opportunity to do a number of things. But that's my point about some of the difficulties that I've had to overcome. And hey, when a new regime took over at CBS, when I was then a young announcer, they had somebody else that they liked better, and I was on the outside looking in. I wasn't going to have much. In effect, I got fired. And I'm thinking, well, where am I going to go? But I'm a baby Christian at that point, and I said, okay, Lord, you know what? Romans 8:28, you said all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are the called according to your purpose. So my job is to seek after you and learn all I can about your word. Your job is to take care of me. So whatever happens, I was hoping to get a job at Fox as one of the fourth or fifth announce team guys. The Lord had it that, no, you're going to be co-hosting a show with Terry Bradshaw. So that was a springboard that put me in a different whole plane. So the point is, those difficulties will come, young lady, but you make sure that you stay true to your craft and you stay true to him. He will open those doors for you, no question, no matter what stands in front of you in the way of difficulties. Mm-hmm. Carrie? Oh, okay. Set up then, okay.
When do we get you back on
I'm in the middle of contract negotiations now to expand my role in news, which I'm very thankful for. So I won't talk much about it publicly because we just have to see how things go, but it's been intimated pretty clearly that, which is oxymoronic, but it's been intimated that I'll be doing a lot more in news, and I'm very happy about that, particularly as it relates to the evening news. The CTM show is going well. They've got a great show going, and I do contribute a lot to that show, but I think they like what I'm doing with the evening news and contributing to 60 Minutes and 60 Minutes Sports and CBS Sunday Morning, so all good. I just want to continue to go ahead and pursue excellence, and even at this age and stage, so no question. I love the question, so yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. What's the last part of that? Yes, ma'am. I thought that Carrie and Tracy, your competitor morning anchor, I thought that Carrie and Tracy dealt with that perfectly. And I know Mr. Brock was listening intently to what they were saying. It's important that we have a diverse newsroom so that people can look at what took place and filter it through a fair and accurate lens. We already know what the studies show in terms of people can say they don't see color. People, yes, they do see color. People do see things, and you are a product of your environment and your upbringing. Period. I wish people would stop lying about that. It would be nice for us to get to that point, but what we should do, I humbly think, is to see the strengths associated with the diversity that's there as opposed to something that's stereotypically negative. So to the degree that we have more diversity, and even though Carrie and Tracy speak up in the newsroom, and they should, referencing Reverend Gill, who was the highlight of the day, saying when you have proximity to power, you need to speak on it, and you need to speak on it loudly. However, I'm sorry, what's your name? Natalia. Until there are more Natalias in position, we need significant numbers in management positions behind the camera. That's where the decisions are made and strong decision influences are. That's where you now get a representative feel. You got Asian Americans, you got Hispanics, you got blacks, you got whites. That's where you get a real understanding in terms of how things are filtered through a fair lens. And I thought I caught the tail end of what Carrie was saying about let's not be so, I know North Carolina, but he was talking about so centric in terms of where the focus is with news as opposed to spreading it across the spectrum so we're getting a good feel with that. And it's going to take some time to be able to diffuse that. But to the degree that we get some talented people in position who will speak their minds, and I heard Carrie's point loud and clear, as an African American male, there's some real challenges there. You got to speak, be under control. The Bible says it's a soft word, it turns away wrath. But, we have to be mindful. Anything that we do that's modulated a little bit higher than others is seen as threatening and intimidating. But there's some things that need to be threatening and intimidating if the information is wrong. So, okay. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Real simple answer from my perspective. Dr. Fuse Hall, Ms. Foster, Professor Jeffries, Keontae, they may have a slightly different take on it. My answer is a real simple one. Be the best student that you can be right now. I go back to the speech, depth before height, because what you're doing is laying an excellent foundation. When an employer looks at your resume, they're going to see what kind of student were you in the classroom. Good grades, the whole 9 yards, fine. What about extracurricular activities? It says something about you. Did you show things that showed stick-to-itiveness or going outside the comfort zone in your box? Those kinds of things. Be the best that you can. Purposely involve yourself in diverse groups, because again, the news of the world now, the globe is so small now. it necessitates, I think, a broader understanding of things so that you can talk comfortably and effectively in any environment. When I went to do news, sitting in those few weeks for Scott Pelley, it wasn't earth-shaking to me. Now, I had a fundamental understanding of local, national, and international news, but now I want to increase the depth of understanding with that. So that's incumbent upon me to make certain that I'm staying conversant by getting online and reading as much as I can. While you're in school, be the best student. If you're taking English, you make sure you master it, that you be a superb writer. If it's history, have a good grasp of that, because all of that comes into play when you're reporting on something. If you can use a variety of examples to make your point, you're better than the other person who's very narrow-minded, myopic in terms of what they're talking about. You follow what I'm saying? So all of that helps. And as you're pursuing your course, again, I go back to what I said earlier, you may not land in the position that you're going to be ultimately in, but it's on the path, and it may zigzag, but all of those experiences help in pursuit of that. When I was at, final example to make that point, when I was working in Xerox, I'm in sales. Xerox at the time had the best sales training of any company, one of the best in the world. I used that sales training in interviewing on the basketball floor or on the football field. I used those interviewing skills, when to ask an open-ended question, when to ask a more pointed question. I remember one example that really put me to the test, and now I should be careful. They said this is on the internet, so that means it's going out to the world. Okay, so I'm doing a NCAA championship basketball game. And those who know sports will figure this one out, but so I had the duty as a sideline reporter, Liz, to go and interview the losing coach. And in this game, when one team hit a shot that put them up by 2 or 3, the opposing team still had 6 seconds left on the clock, and the players looked defeated and didn't run a play and let a lot of valuable time run off the clock and wound up losing the game. Now, I've got the unenviable task of going over to interview the coach. This coach had been routinely panned and excoriated throughout the season for not being a good bench coach. I wasn't one who said that, but now I got to go do the interview, NCAA championship game, the world watching. What do I do? So the question that I asked was an open-ended one, as opposed to embarrassing the coach. I said, Coach, if you had it to do over again, would you do something different? Now, what was in my mind was I played for a superb high school coach who was the first high school coach in the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame, Morgan Wooten. Matter of fact, there's a 60-minute sports piece coming on him next Wednesday night at 10 o'clock on Showtime that I'm doing. A little plug there, right? I know, but it's worth watching because this guy he's 83 and a sensational coach, sensational. He had us prepared for game-ending situations. We were routinely prepared, so nothing was a surprise. Just like in the Super Bowl, Malcolm Butler, even though he had been beaten by that big catch by the Seattle Seahawks guy, and he could have gotten down, he didn't. When they got ready to run that play, which Russell Wilson still should have handed off to the beast mode to do it, he was going to pass. But Butler was in the moment. He said, I remember seeing this formation when I'm watching film. I see this. DVD. I'm still old school too. Like Miss D. Cherie Lofton said that, talking about that. So he jumped the route and intercepted the ball and was the hero of the game. He was prepared. This coach didn't have his team prepared. I asked him open-ended, what would you do differently? He looked at me and snapped. I wouldn't do anything different. You guys think you have all the answers. I wouldn't do anything differently. I only had time for that one question. I bit my bottom lip, suffered the humiliation of such, and said, Coach, congratulations on a good season. Jim Nance, back to you. Now, I had to eat that. That hurt, because I know the game, but I didn't embarrass him on national TV. It was only months later when I saw in a periodical where he was asked a question by somebody at an event, what was the stupidest question that you were asked? And he said, the question that James Brown asked me about what would I do differently, he said I'd win the game. I called him up and talked to him. I said, you know what now, I was a little righteously angry then, okay? I said, Coach, let me help you understand how and why I did not undress you. I know the game well enough to know you didn't have your team prepared. Those kids did not run a play. That's your fault. I could have asked you, why didn't your kids run a play at the end? Did you not have them prepared? I didn't do that. I asked you an open-ended question and gave you a way out, and you snapped at me, and I wasn't one of the guys that, if you want to play that game, we can carry this on because you were the one that was unprepared. You failed those kids. He got it. He understood, buried the hatchet, and went on. So those are tough situations as well, too. But again, being prepared, being in the marketing environment, prepared me for those things to make sure that I was a good listener as well, too, to be able to ask questions in a news format. My plane is late, so I still got a few more minutes if you all, well, I just found out, yeah, we got a few more questions by anybody? Yep, go ahead.
Okay, so I know some of the girls in the department, they want to go into correspondence, they want to be talk show hosts. So what are some of the things that you do to prepare for interviews, whether it's with an athlete or with the coach? What are some of the things that you do to get yourself ready?
Great question, Mikeia. First of all, make certain that I'm well read, that I understand as much about the background as possible. And you all have great resources available to you today versus what we did back in the day to get as much information as possible so you know everything you can, being amply prepared. But even being such, oftentimes some of the information you read is not accurate because by the time a story is told by the third, fourth, or fifth person, it's not reflective of what actually happened. I learned that the hard way one day interviewing Willie Mays. And there was a story that was routinely told about something, and I asked him that when I was doing a radio show. And he said, young man, that story is so far off the beaten track that is absolutely incorrect. So I read as much as possible, but I try to ask open-ended questions and let the interviewee walk me down the path. Now, I have a direction that I want to go, but I will still try to ask it open-ended and let them tell me something, just like having a conversation here. And that's all TV is, to the degree that you can have a conversation where you're eliciting as much as possible from the interviewee. That's what makes a fascinating story, as opposed to a lot of talent who would try to make themselves a story and would try to show with these long questions or what have you, trying to show how smart they are. The focus is on the interviewee. So if the viewer at home can say, I learned something from that session, then you've done your job. Mm-hmm. You want to take one more? One more question? All right, I can call on somebody. There's good. I had my eye on you the first time, but go ahead. Great question. If I ever do lose the passion for what I do, then it's time to do something else. And it's important to recognize that. Staying true. Matthew 6:33 says, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. So my aim is to be passionate and excited about what I do first, and everything else gets added to it. All the other good stuff that comes with it, but to be good. So I'm excited about what I do, and the fact that I can do a range of things now. And I was blessed when I was at HBO to host championship fights. You have no idea how excited I am now to get the opportunity to host the Manny Pacquiao, big man first, Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao fight on May the 2nd. So I like to keep the broad range of things going. That's what fuels my passion and my interest. Because if it does change, then I know I'm just collecting a paycheck. I'm not doing myself any good, and I'm not doing my boss any good. And I try, as I said before, to kind of close where I was, to make certain that everything that I do it excellently. And if I'm doing it excellently as unto the Lord, doing it excellently because, as Kerry was saying, that's the target that he has for himself. He competes against himself. Then you know what? My boss is going to be pleased because I'm giving it my absolute best in everything that I can. Hey, first of all, I really appreciate the patience that all of you have shown this evening. This evening now, late afternoon, early evening. I told Dr. Fuse Hall, I have been so impressed. This has been a wonderfully emotional day. Listening to the two panels before, I was talking to Dee Cherie Lofton about how she's maintaining her integrity by not playing music that has a preponderance of misogynist lyrics and a lot of cursing, because we do ourselves harm. Now, it's a sad commentary on the times that people may not tune in because they're not getting a steady diet of that. There is a direct cause and effect relationship. So going back to Reverend Gill, who was the highlight of the day, we have a responsibility to make certain that we are people, we are professionals of character and integrity, and that will serve us well. Many years ago, I hosted a leadership speakers series with some great speakers. The personal development guru, Tony Robbins. It was General Colin Powell, President Bush 41, and General Norman Schwarzkopf, and I'll never forget working with him. And he started his series by saying, you can look at any profession, but we had, this was being narrowcast into corporations around the country that had purchased this leadership series. And he was talking to mid-level and senior level managers and executives. And he said that there are many people who possess an awful lot of talent, potential, a lot of talent, and their talent will take them to great heights. Going back to that depth before height emphasis, whose talent, and maybe people will be fixated on that and promote them to positions of influence. And he said he did a study of all the successful people on Wall Street and those who failed. 8 out of the 10 failures on Wall Street who had risen to the captains of industry position failed because of a lack of character and integrity. So be that first and foremost, because it will expose you if you don't have that. Marv Levy, the great Buffalo Bills coach, said personality is what you show to the camera. You know, anybody can put on a show for the camera, but character and integrity are who you are behind closed doors, and they all ought to be the same at all times. I'll never forget what American President Theodore Roosevelt said, which really impressed me. It stuck with me. He said, to educate in mind and not in morals is to create a menace to society. Bottom line is, God knows your heart. You make certain that you are a person of integrity and character, and if you add all this other to you, the other layers, taking advantage of this wonderful faculty and an opportunity to blend with some students that you'll never get a chance, many, to see again in life, take advantage of that. That's going to make you that much better at talent. So as you start to rise, we've got some people that we can cheer on and shout about, like young Reverend Gill and the rest of you. Those are the people that folks want to follow because you got some substance in you. Does that make sense? Amen. Thank you.